capital is oxygen, right? So if you're building yourself a Ferrari, but you're not injecting it with what it needs to run. So your
Hmm.
business and strategy is the systems, and the capital is what makes it run. At the end, cash is king. And we've seen, well, the whole Exxon thing in the 90s, like companies disappear because they're not counting cash, they're not paying attention. So you can't fudge capital, right? You either have $100 or I don't, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of companies lose because you can play with the P&L, right? There's all
Hmm.
sorts of things you can do to make it look the way you want it to look. But I think if you can be really super smart, if you can attract venture capital, if you don't need to quote unquote
Hmm.
qualify, that skill set will allow you to never run. Because when you look at the facts, again, depending what you pull, there's all sorts of things. The bottom line, 90% fail within 5 to 7 years. Here's a crazy fact.
Yeah.
What was it? It is 2 out of 3 companies on the Inc. 5000. So those are
Uh-huh.
America's fastest growing companies. Within 3 years, disappear.
Isn't that crazy?
2 out of 3. And you're sort of like, hold on a second, how did you become darlings? And oftentimes it's chaos, it's system, cash issues. They don't set the systems up. So it's not a simple, well, they didn't have capital. Well, true, they didn't have capital, they're not there no more. But also, I also believe the rigor, the fiduciary responsibility in
Uh-huh.
managing that capital is critical, right? So let's quickly get into the fundraising, like the four
Hmm.
pillars. Can you talk a little bit about, the four pillars and then how founders can use them to sort of approach fundraising methodically rather than
Yeah.
probably happens haphazardly most of the times.
It's really funny. The metaphor I like is that this is there when someone raises money, you kind of see, oh wow, they got this money and there's an announcement and but you don't see all the things below the surface. And those four things below the surface are storytelling, there's organization, outreach, and being able to close with confidence. And what those four things include are sometimes non-obvious steps and the order in which you need to do them in order to tell a story that attracts investors, to not just pitch but also listen. The secondly, to be really organized in terms of your data room and your materials and a message that really connects with the investors. And then third, to outreach, not just to spray and pray to every possible investor, but to reach the people who, from a thesis perspective, believe in the world you're trying to create. And then fourth,
Mhm.
when it comes to closing, actually managing and project managing aggressively the closing of your round so that you don't get to the finish line and get stopped. So those are really important stages and steps in the funding framework.
Can you take us go a little bit deeper on the
Mhm.
storytelling side of that
Yeah.
aspect? Can you take us for a little journey down there?
Absolutely. When you're trying to connect with an investor, many founders are trying to show them, you know, look how great our product is, look how smart our team is, something like that, right? And maybe, oh wow, we've had like really good sales momentum. And they fail to do is separate, that very good content from the story. And the difference between a content and a story is a story has an arc. A great story introduces you to uh, a character, to a protagonist. It creates some context that you start to care about them. Then there's some like tension, and there's something sometimes bad that happens to them, right? Like these are
Yeah.
the stories that everybody is on the edge of their seat, and then something or someone comes and helps them, and then that protagonist is able to overcome difficulty and then return to the world, maybe a little bit transformed, but go back to like the thing that they cared about or something like that. And so there's a couple of variations, but that of course is the most famous story that you've heard in every like movie or kid's book growing up, or it's in every like ancient fable um, or legend. And those are the stories that keep showing up over thousands of years of human history. And in every movie that lands in
Yeah.
your streaming queue, because that's what we as humans get into. Like we need to know how the story ends, and we care deeply about the person. Now, why am I like talking about that so much? It's because founders don't do this, and I
Mhm.
need them when I work with them, when I'm coaching them, or when I've helped people in the past, to say, tell us a story where your customer is the hero, and talk about how, every day they used to do this thing, and maybe, maybe they're a physician or a nurse in an emergency room. And one day there's a child that comes in with a broken arm that fell off a police structure. What's going to happen to her? Because there's no radiologist to read the chart. Like you can't get a hold of them. They're not answering their page. It turns out there is another scanner device that is like launched by the company, right? And it's able to do a different type of imaging, and it's able to see the fracture from different sides without um, a radiologist to read an X-ray. And so it's able to detect, and AI is able to tell you like, oh wow, she has this hairline fracture here, and it needs, and so you're able to get an AI diagnosis that can be confirmed later by a physician in order to accelerate and help this person, right? And so the patient is released earlier, and and good things happen, right? So that is
Yeah.
a story that shows how, for this hypothetical medical imaging product that it's similar to one that I know a founder of, it's basically in a few seconds helping you understand very clearly what it is, what this does, why it might be good, when it would show up, and how it can help you or someone like you that you know. So it's relatable, and you can connect to it and so forth. So then you can start saying, it turns out that this thing saves time, that, chiefs of medicine at, these elite hospitals love it. The market for this is, $20 billion, many other good things. But,
Yeah.
the story really has to connect with us as humans first, because
Yeah.
we think emotionally before we think logically and rationally.
And that's what I love about your funding framework, because it comes down to story. Like when you build a brand, it always comes from the story.
Yeah.
Even though, I just finished, I did a Harvard Agentic AI course, and
Mhm.
it too talks about where humans manage the agent, but the story, if you will, or what you're doing stays at that story level. So for me, the concept of storytelling is transcend. I think it'll transcend technology, unless we completely get replaced. And well, that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
But don't think that's happening. And so the importance of storytelling, because if you nail that right at the front end to attract the capital, then there's your brand story right there, the hero journey, right? And people can relate to the hero journey and understand. I see how I have it. I've not read it. One of the things I was always tweaked by that made no sense to me, and she's a self-made billionaire, how Sarah Blakely was told no, I don't know, 120 times.
Yeah.
So I got to read her book, but I'm like, she identified a problem that 50% of the population has, and somehow 100 people decided to say no to her. So I don't know the story, but I suspect that it
Yeah.
didn't. I suspect there's some anti-women things. I mean, there are people that have the unnecessary biases that are harmful.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's a portion of that where people say, I just won't invest in ABC. Some of it is
Mhm.
strategic, and not, we don't invest, we only invest in technology companies. So I think you got to go fish in the pond that are looking for a consumer
You
good
got
thing.
to
I think
fish in
that
the
might be
pond where
a,
there's fish.
you got to fish in the pond with just fish. Like, if you're asking surgeon to invest in, car parts, like they're not going to relate, right? That's
Yeah.
not something that they do. So investment is the same.
That's a great point, and that's why outreach, which is, one of the parts of the funding framework, is so important, because people will just connect to someone they think would like to invest, as opposed to folks that are just waiting to connect because they understand the market in a new, unique way. Maybe they're a surgeon, or they see something in the startup that fits the pattern that they've observed from previous investments, and so they're we like to invest
Yeah.
in founders who do A, B, and C or have had certain experiences. Um,
Yeah.
and so recognizing that there are these folks out there that are waiting for you to come into their life and share what you're working on. And they can not just be providers of capital, but potentially helpful in terms of their network with customer connections and other like valuable ways of supporting, including sometimes talent and hiring.
Yeah, that's the big piece.